Some crimes don't just make headlines. They leave a mark on the country itself. The pine-lined backroads of Jasper, Texas, a place where the nights are quiet, the roads stretch endlessly into darkness, and the past hangs heavy in the humid air. In 1998, a single night on one of these roads exposed a truth many didn't want to face. A truth about hatred, about violence, and about how quickly a familiar place can become the setting for something unthinkable. And the night that changed Jasper forever. Welcome to the Murky Trail. It was just after midnight on June 7th. James Byrd Jr. was walking home after visiting relatives and friends. He didn't own a car, so walking was normal for him. He knew these roads, the bends, the dips, the way the trees swallowed the moonlight. He was a father, a grandfather, a man known for his warm laugh and easygoing nature. He wasn't in a hurry, he wasn't afraid, but on rural roads like Huff Creek Road, you can hear a vehicle long before you see it. A pickup truck approached from behind. It slowed. The passenger window rolled down. Inside were three men. They knew him by sight. Jasper was a small town. People recognized each other. They offered him a ride, and James, being the trusting soul he was, accepted, likely assuming it was a neighborly gesture. He had no idea that the men in that truck were carrying a hatred that had been simmering long before that night. Investigators later determined that the men had already been drinking and driving around aimlessly that night. The three men were Sean Berry, Lawrence Brewer, and John King. On the surface, they were ordinary, the kind of men you might pass in a grocery store without a second thought. But beneath that surface, Brewer and King had strong ties to white supremacist groups. Their tattoos, writings, and prison affiliations made their ideology clear, and their intentions that night were darker than anything James could have imagined. To him, they were just locals offering a lift. To them, he was a target. Evidence later showed that the attack was not spontaneous. It was fueled by racial hatred and a desire to commit a hate-motivated act. The moment he stepped into that truck, the night took a turn that could never be undone. Investigators concluded that James was attacked shortly after entering the vehicle. There were signs of a struggle, and evidence inside the truck supported this. This is where the situation escalated from a ride to a targeted hate crime. Investigators would later reconstruct the events of that night through physical evidence, tire tracks, broken chains, and the chilling statements of the men involved. A logging chain found in the back of the pickup became a central piece of evidence. The men used the truck and the chain to commit the crime. The chain was later recovered along the road, and forensic analysis tied it directly to the suspects. This part of the crime is the most disturbing, and while I won't describe the physical harm, it's important to understand that the chain and truck were used as weapons. One of the most shocking discoveries for investigators was the length of the crime scene. Evidence was found along a long stretch of Huff Creek Road, a trail that told the story of what happened without needing graphic detail. Deputies described it as one of the most haunting scenes they had ever encountered. After the crime, the men left James's body near a local African-American church and cemetery, a detail that investigators believed was intentional and symbolic. This added another layer of racial hatred to the crime. The crime scene stretched for miles, a trail of horror winding through the pine forest, illuminated only by the flashing lights of deputies who followed it at dawn. One officer described the scene as a path of silence, as if the woods themselves were holding their breath. What they found left no doubt. James Byrd Jr. had been targeted because of the color of his skin. The suspects left behind the chain, tools, cigarette butts, beer bottles, tire tracks, blood evidence, and personal items belonging to James. It was as if they didn't expect to be caught, or didn't care. Law enforcement followed the trail directly to the suspects within hours. The men returned to one of their homes, cleaned the truck, and continued their day as if nothing had happened. This coldness became a major factor in the prosecution's argument. It was a hate crime of staggering brutality, one that would force the entire nation to confront the reality that racism wasn't a relic of the past. It was alive, it was violent, and it had just taken a man's life on a quiet Texas road. By sunrise, Jasper was no longer just a small East Texas town. It was the center of a national conversation. Reporters arrived from every major network. Satellite trucks lined the streets. Residents woke up to find their hometown on every television in America. Some were shocked. Some were angry. Some were heartbroken, but many were determined. Community leaders, black and white, stood together. Churches opened their doors for vigils. Neighbors who had lived side by side for decades refused to let hatred define their home. Jasper was grieving, but it was also united in a way few expected. Still, beneath the unity, there was fear. Fear that the world would forever associate their town with the actions of 3 men. Fear that the shadow of that night would never fully fade. Texas Rangers, FBI agents, and local deputies worked the case with an intensity rarely seen. The evidence was overwhelming. The truck, the chain, the writings found in the suspects' homes, the confessions, the timeline became clear. The motive became undeniable. And the community watched as the truth unfolded piece by piece, each detail more disturbing than the last. During questioning, Berry tried to distance himself from the others. Brewer and King blamed each other, and all 3 gave conflicting accounts. But the physical evidence told a consistent story. Because of the racial motive, the suspects' extremist affiliations, the symbolic elements of the crime, and the brutality and intent. This case became one of the clearest examples of a racially motivated hate crime in modern U.S. history. The trials were some of the most closely watched in Texas history. Prosecutors presented a mountain of evidence. Witnesses testified. Jurors listened in stunned silence. The verdicts came swiftly. 2 of the men were sentenced to death. The 3rd received life in prison. For James Byrd's family, justice was necessary. But it could never bring him back. Still, they showed remarkable strength, speaking publicly about forgiveness, unity, and the need for change. Their grace in the face of unimaginable loss left a lasting impression on the nation. The murder of James Byrd Jr. became a catalyst for change. It led to new hate crime legislation. It sparked national conversations about extremism and racism, and it reminded the country that hatred doesn't disappear just because we stop talking about it. It hides, it waits, and sometimes it rides down a dark road in a pickup truck. But James's legacy is not defined by the men who took his life. It's defined by the people who stood up afterward, his family, his community, and the countless individuals who refused to let his story fade. If you drive down Huff Creek Road today, the pines still sway in the breeze. The road is quiet, peaceful. But for those who know what happened there, the silence carries weight. It's a reminder of a man whose life mattered, a reminder of a night that changed a town, and a reminder that the fight against hatred is never truly over.